Hello, I'm Mustache Mike, and welcome to my corner of the workshop. I have received a lot of requests to do some more basic scroll saw videos. So beginning with this video, we're going to do just that. Here's the way it'll go. Each video will teach a certain skill set, and then we're going to do a little project so you can put that skill to work. So appropriately, we start out with straight lines. Okay, so let's get started. So for our Skill Builders project, today I chose to make a wood suet feeder. And as we go along, you'll see why I chose this, because it has a number of repetitive straight lines. Now the wood is pine. I chose a project that uses a thicker wood, 3/4 in this case, because thicker wood has different characteristics of sawing than thin wood. There are a number of factors we'll have to consider. So we need to size these boards down a little bit. We'll mark them out with a square and a pencil, and then we'll go over to our saw and begin our straight cuts. So we're using a DeWalt 788 for this project. I chose a number 4 skip tooth blade. They do very nicely in 3/4 pine. Of course, you always have to make sure before you start, especially with thicker wood, that your table is square. I like to check my blades from both angles. All right, so we're going to be cutting along this line first. You want to approach your cut for a moment and start to think about what you're going to do. Start setting the mind up for what's going to take place. Now, as we approach the edge of the board, it's very important that within the first 1/8 to 1/4 inch, you have lined your blade up and made any little minor adjustments you need. I like to split the line, and it's good to practice that a lot, because if you learn to split the line, you'll cut truly a straight line. If you begin by cutting on one side or the other without practice, you'll tend to either gain thickness on either side of the lines. You notice as we go along here, immediately the board starts to cant a little bit. That's because of the way these saw blades are made. They're stamped from one side, and it causes one side to pull just a little bit. So you see what I mean here? I've stopped the action for a minute, laid my square on the board, and it's running right along parallel with the arm of the saw, and you can see how much angle we have. That adjustment will happen almost always on straight line cuts with this type of blade and this type of saw. Okay, we've made our first cut now. Check it with a square. Hey, who says you can't make good straight square cuts on a scroll saw? Now in this particular project, we're going to have a number of inside straight cuts. So I took my boards and I want to mark them out. Now as we go to these inside cuts, we're actually going to cut on the inside of the line. So it'll give you a little practice on doing that. The reason for that is if you cut on the inside of the line here, hopefully any mistakes will be on the inside waist piece. It'll also give some room to fix things, to do a little filing or sanding. Now, being this is an inside cut, of course, we're going to have to drill a hole. It actually becomes a pierce cut. We're going to talk a lot more about that in other videos, inside pierce cuts. We'll need to drill a hole, and it's important to not drill your hole right in a corner. Quite often, if you do this, you're going to be too close to the corner and you will see it on the inside margin of the wood. So come up anywhere along the side as I did here and drill back just a little bit from the line. So we go back to the saw, unhook the blade. We're going to have to thread our blade through the hole into the piece. And with this 3/4 wood, even though it's soft pine, I like to tighten my blade up pretty good. On this DeWalt, it goes from effectively 1 up to 5.5. I usually like to set it pretty much all the way at a 5. And the reason is as you push the wood into the blade, you will have a tendency, especially as making a turn, to angle that blade just a little bit, and it can throw the angle of your cut off. So keep the blade good and tight. Now we're going to go on the inside of the line again here. As we approach the corner, we're going to treat this cut like you would a jigsaw. You come up to the edge, you go around the corner, line up again with the next straight line. As we go on in future videos, we'll start making those tight snap turns. But at this point, work your way back over to the line, stay just on the inside. Be careful you don't start crossing back and forwards. It's very easy to do. Go slow. And you'll notice as I come up to some cross grain here, it slows up a little bit. Go ahead and slow up. Remember that if you start pushing this blade, you want to keep that speed constant. You're going to affect the cut. Now again, as we approach the corner here, we're going to just make a turn. You can always stop for a moment and kind of think what you want to do. If you do stop a straight cut, make sure if you've moved that board, you come back to center, you pull it back a little bit before you start again. If you don't, you could start off right away on your cut. So I've approached the corner, nice and square to a dead end. I back up a little bit, and just like you would with a saber saw, I come around the corner and quickly line up again, make that adjustment for the angle the kerf is going to, and the edge of the blade is going to cause, and then proceed with your next straight cut. So as we make our final turn and we're starting to approach our hole, we got to think about how we want to finish up. And it's important that you stay on the inside of the line and that you also think about that hole. We want to come right along the line and meet up with the other line. And what's going to happen, and it's very common, is we're going to leave just a little raised spot in the wood. It's very common. We'll show you later how you can take that out. For a project, we're going to need 2 of these pieces. Now, normally you would just set one piece on the other and trace the inside line. I generally, on this type of cut, do not do that, because what happens is every time you trace a successive piece, especially if there's a number of them, and you're trying to cut on the inside of the line like we suggested, you'll start losing width. So mark it out a second time with your ruler and square. Now is also a good time to take it over to the sander and sand off some of those pencil marks and even dress up the outside edges a little bit. Now here's a good shot of what that hole can leave as you come up. What I do is I love to use that little trick of the sandpaper on the paint stick, and it doesn't take much to clean up them inside edges and take that little ridge that happens when you come up to your hole. Now it's time to lay out the grid work. You might wonder why I just didn't use a piece of hardware cloth. The reason I wanted a wood grid is because this will give a lot of opportunity to make a number of real short, straight cuts. There'll be almost 25 of those. So we're going to have to lay out our grid work here. Being ours is going to be cut out of wood, and I have to have a little margin thickness in the wood, I chose about 7/8 of an inch. It's going to take a little time to lay this out and do it correctly. Do it in pencil in case you need to erase. Make sure you're good and square, because we're going to cut a number of squares out of here. Good straight line practice. Now I'm drilling a hole in the center of each one of these little squares, and I'm doing these as close to the center as I can. You'll see why in a minute why I did it this way. We're back at the saw. Pick any one of the holes. I started in the corner. Thread your blade in. Make sure you got good stiff tension. And there's a couple different ways you could cut out these squares, and you might think as we go along, my goodness, this is tedious doing this. Well, it's not only giving a practice in cutting straight lines, but it's also teaching to be consistent in what we do. So bear along. Hold on to your wood with this type of blade. It's real easy to get some chatter. Now the first method that I chose was going from the center hole and making cuts out to each corner. Make it right in the corner. As we go along now, we're going to go back to the center hole with our blade and go out to the edge, make our saber saw type turn, and cut out to each corner. It's going to take some time, but it is something you're going to have to get used to with scroll sawing. As you do more intricate work, you may work on projects that have 100 or more holes, and got to get used to tensioning and retensioning, tightening and retightening your blade. So it's good practice. Now, another method of doing this is from the center hole, going straight out to the edge and making the same type of turns that we made on cutting the inside square out of the main piece. So this might be another preferred method, and you're going to get quite a little practice doing this. If you start making mistakes, stop for a while. Go out and do something else, rest, because if you don't, you'll just start compounding errors very quickly. This is a good tip for any time you do scroll sawing. It's very intricate work at times. It can be tedious, and if the brain and the fingers start to fail, it's time to give it a rest. So after you make the 4 little sweeps, you cut out the edges, just like you would with a saber saw. And 25 holes later, you're done. Some good practice. All right, back to the bench. Let's put this thing together. Put a bead of glue around 3 of the pieces. We won't do it on the top grid because we're going to mount 2 screws to be able to take this on and off to be able to get the suet cakes in. 2 holes for 2 screws should about do it. And if you like some finish, now's a good time to do it while you can still get at the inside. So as I'm applying the finish here, we want to think again about making our straight cuts. Take your time, approach the wood, think about what you're going to do. Use the right blade. Don't push the speed. It's not a race to get this done. Make sure quickly you'll line up, that you compensate for the edge of the blade if you need to, and go slow. If you stop, back up, make sure that you've lined your blade up before you proceed. You don't want to make any little notch, and proceed again. This one's going to be hung from a little string in a tree, so added a little eye bolt. Here we put the suet cake in, put the top on, and we're ready to go. So there you go, straight lines on a scroll saw. Now we use the DeWalt DW788. These basic skills can be used on any type of scroll saw. Practice in any of these skills is key. It's going to take some time for you to get to know wood and also to get to know your particular saw. So we hope you enjoy it. Come on back. We're definitely going to have some more. And believe you me, you can trust Mustache Mike, because I would never pull your stash.